That's like the first time anyone's ever said that to me getting ready to do a live
I'm running
stream.
late because there's a mountain lion outside my house.
That's a totally legit reason. I'll like let that slide. A lot of you have been watching our big journey moving from Connecticut to Pennsylvania for the entire time that we have been living this exciting trip, moving homesteads. So a lot of you will remember that there was a time when my family and I lived in a tiny house.
Oh, you're dying.
Yurt?
Or nerd.
Oh, you should say our tiny home. That would have worked perfect.
I liked a nerd.
Which one will it be? Yurt, tiny home? Now, it might not fit the strict definition of a tiny house. Some people who want to be really strict about that definition would say 500 square feet or less, somewhere around there. We figured the tiny house definition really applied to how much square feet per person. Because if you're one person in 500 square feet versus 6 people in 1,000, we figured we could count ourselves in the club somewhere, rounding up or rounding down. We are moving homesteads to a homestead in Pennsylvania. We're moving to a much bigger house than the one we're currently living in. However, for about 6 months, my family is going to have to live in a tiny home. We have 1,000 square feet to work with up above a garage. And so for the last couple days, I have been putting together designs. We come in the front doors. You notice this one, when you walk through, it's a little bit more open. There's not walls on both sides. We got the living room space, television, you can sit, watch, enjoy, relaxing. Then you have your little kitchenette with the eat-in area. We walk back, on the first door there would be the bathroom, and then we spent about 9 months in 1,000 square feet, 6 of us. At the time, 4 loud, rambunctious children, human beings, running around. And all of that was actually pretty pleasant through the summer and through the fall. And then winter came. Winter here in Pennsylvania, especially the last couple of years, has not been terrible. I can't complain. We haven't got 2, 3, 4 feet of snow. Honestly, I don't know if we even got 1 foot of snow. But we have our cold days, and the kids certainly spend a lot more time inside. Cabin fever is a real thing, and
I like anyone saying this. Say well in the comments.
A PSA. If you or someone you love is suffering from cabin fever, go outside. That's all you have to do.
That's all you have to do.
And over the long winter, what it felt like in the tiny house, I learned that I myself am not a huge fan of tiny homes or tiny living. I edit videos and podcasts for a living. I like my quiet workspaces. And there's not a lot of quiet when you cram 6 individuals into 1,000 square feet, especially when 4 of them are being homeschooled and have a lot more energy in the winter than in the summer when they were outside playing. I was more than happy to leave our tiny home. Once our larger house was empty on the property, I could not move out quick enough, get myself an office with a quiet workspace where I could edit the podcast in peace. But that was not the unanimous feeling of the family. Kay longs for the tiny house again. Now that we're in the big house, the kids they have their play space downstairs. We have different bedrooms. It's really wonderful. It's nice for a large family to have plenty of space. But Kay finds herself looking back on those simpler times when she had less to take care of, less to keep up, less messes for the kids to even make because there was less space for a mess to be made in. And she talks about in the future, when it's just me and her and all these little human beings are out doing hopefully their own homesteading adventures somewhere. She talks about going back to tiny living. If we didn't have to, we would not choose to live 6 humans in 1,000 square feet. And that's why we moved out of this place.
I'm torn on this. I really enjoyed the size of this.
There were things you liked.
I liked it a lot.
Our last night, you were like, oh, I think I'm gonna miss this little place. Why? What did you like most about it?
You were like, I won't.
I'm like, I'll see you later. I'm going to the dark house right now.
I loved how easy it was to keep everything clean. I like that. I like our family being so close together most of the time. I like everybody being in our bedroom at night, you know, talking to everybody, reading our stories,
I did like
saying
that.
good night.
Yeah.
There's really nice closeness to it.
And while I'm enjoying having our space now, the larger space we're in, something tells me when it's just the two of us and I have a little more quiet, I might enjoy it a little bit more. If you're at all interested in tiny living, like Kay is, she's got the plan. We're going to be empty nesters in a small empty nest on a mountain somewhere in western Pennsylvania, probably. If that sounds like a nice place for you to set up a small little nest somewhere, then you're going to really enjoy tonight's interview. We're going to be interviewing Ariel, who lives in a tiny home out in the wilderness.
Hey guys, welcome to my channel. This is the home of Fynith, my tiny house where I live off-grid in the Western Mountains. Fynith is Welsh for my nest. My house is about 170 square feet, not counting the loft. It's on a trailer on wheels. I do live here full-time, year-round, off-grid as in not having any physical connection to any public utilities. I get my electricity from solar panels with a generator as backup. I heat my house with wood and also have a propane heater if I need a backup for that. I've got a propane stove and oven and water heater as well. Carry all the water that I use in my house from a neighboring well because my climate is too cold to allow much of any other kind of water system. I get to live in a pretty amazing spot. I'm a little over 6,000 feet above sea level in elevation, so it does come with some often challenging weather, quick weather changes, lots of snow, and sometimes even more than that. I try to always share the real side of things. This life is not all rainbows and roses, but I do love it. I love living here, and I try to help others learn from my experiences with what works, what doesn't, things I'm trying, things that didn't go so well, my favorite parts, and just all the ups and downs of daily life.
I figured that would be a perfect introduction so you can picture this beautiful little tiny home in the beautiful wilderness where Ariel lives as we listen to some what I'm expecting to be incredible stories because of what Ariel said the minute she logged on. Ariel, why don't you tell the audience what you said to me as soon as the webcam opened up?
Well, I was running late to get here to be in front of my camera for the interview because my dog and I were out tracking a mountain lion that walked in front of our house. Not for any particular reason. We don't need to or anything. It's just interesting to see where they go. And I kind of like knowing where things like that are generally when they come by. Not that they couldn't come back by surprise, but I like to be generally aware of where in the vicinity something like a mountain lion's hanging out. So that's why I was running late.
You keep your friends close and your mountain lions closer, I guess, right? Out in the off-grid life. So Ariel, just beautiful picturesque scene that we saw in the beginning. Where is this? Tell us a little bit about your little tiny house and where you live.
So I live in the mountains of western Wyoming, and a lot of the state is high, dry, windy desert. Like if you've ever happened to be unlucky enough to need to drive Interstate 80 across the bottom edge of the state, it's kind of ugly, but the mountains are really gorgeous, and that is where I live. And I'm in my tiny house here. It is on wheels, though you can't tell that at all right now because the snow completely buries the bottom half of the house, but it's about 160 square feet. And kind of as you were saying, square footage per person, it's just me and my dog here, so that is all space for me.
I did the math beforehand and I realized that we pretty much had the similar square footage per person as Ariel. So I was looking forward to hearing her what is guaranteed going to be a much more positive outlook on tiny living. That's why she's here. So Ariel, you mentioned you grew up in Pennsylvania. Tell us a little bit about that childhood?
Well, I grew up in Lancaster County, which is, of course, generally known as Amish country, or else Amish tourist country, at least. My family was not Amish, though I did grow up in a very conservative home. My parents are more brethren, so they looked plain as well. We had cars and lights, not horse and buggies, but I did grow up in a pretty conservative home. And I was homeschooled, as were all 6 of my younger siblings. So I got to learn to do a lot of useful things when I was fairly young, whether I wanted to or not, being the oldest. We grew the majority of our own food and sewed our own clothing, and there's always cooking to do. And my mom was doing most of the school teaching, so I did a lot of the other housework stuff. And so I got to learn a lot of things at a pretty young age, which I don't regret now. I wasn't always thankful for that at the time. And I lived there till I was 20. I guess I just turned 20.
I have to know, because I was thinking about being a father. What did your family think when you told them, I'm going to move out west and I'm going to live in a tiny home in the wilderness?
Well, so that was kind of in 2 steps. When I first moved west was not when I moved into my tiny house. So that came later. I'm not sure I've ever asked them that. I think that I think my family knew at that point that I was fairly independent and did not always do maybe the normal American things. Of course, in a lot of ways, my family was not doing the normal American life in the first place. So if they thought I was crazy, nobody told me that, but I didn't ask either.
That's probably a safe rule of thumb for most of us homesteaders. Don't ask. So you headed out west, especially, I don't know, the Pennsylvania that you grew up in. I'm new to Pennsylvania. We've only been here a year. But
Okay.
very different from, as far as climate goes, scenery goes. Was it a big change moving out west to the mountains?
Yes, very, very different. We have winter. We had winter in Pennsylvania, but even as I was getting older, there didn't seem to be as much snow as when I was younger. Here, I have usually can count on there being snow on the ground at least 8 months a year, sometimes
Wow.
more than that. And that's a solid snow pack. We get frost year round. Last spring, the last snow was on June 21st, which is the first day of summer. The first one was sometime the next month,
Oh
um,
man.
to start the next year. So yes, a very different climate.
Some of the pictures, and we're pulling them up for everybody to see here. Some of the pictures of your tiny home surrounded by the snowbanks. It's pretty incredible. How do you stay warm in this small little space with 450 inches of snow averaged a year outside of that little tiny home for 8 months out of the year?
That's one of the most frequent questions I get, and it's actually super easy. If anybody's ever been in a very small space, the smaller it is, generally the easier it is to keep warm, because there's just not that many square feet of air that you're trying to heat. And when the snow is deep, snow does actually provide a good bit of insulation as well. And my house is also well insulated, and just right over here where you can't quite see it is my little wood stove blazing away, and it's only 12 inches square on the outside, and the firewood that goes in it, this would be a very big chunk. That's
Oh wow.
smaller than most people's kindling. It makes things very, very warm. So staying warm inside is just really not a problem, even though people always think it will be by looking at how cold and snowy it looks like outdoors.
One of the things that we want to talk about tonight, Ariel, is actually homestead life, living off of the land. And, you know, the more snow, the more cold we have, it would seem the harder that is. Are you able to grow throughout much of the season? How do you grow your own food? How do you get your own food off the cold 8 months of winter out there?
I get frost, and I tend to call it frost now if it's not like frozen rock solid down 4 feet, but I get hard freezes actually all summer long. A lot of summer nights will be 26, 25, something like that at night. And so that does make growing things challenging. I have a pretty good sized garden anyway, and I just focus on growing the things that can freeze. So if you've heard people talk about what you should grow in your winter garden, that's basically what I do in my summer garden. I grow all the leafy greens, all the brassica family stuff, all of the root crops like beets and carrots and potatoes. And sometimes it's warm enough to grow a green bean or a zucchini, but not always. So I grow as much as I can. A lot of those root crops, of course, store fairly well, so I can use them through some good portion of the year. Just the other night I ate the very last of my carrots that were fresh. I also like canning and dehydrating, so I have a bunch of pickled carrots still that I can eat. And then in the winter, my one thing I do indoors is I do a lot of sprouting, so growing like alfalfa, broccoli, and clover sprouts, because I can grow them quickly in a windowsill. So I eat a lot of sprouts as my fresh greens in the winter because I can grow them. Then on the meat side, I happen to live in an area with pretty spectacular hunting, which I can't actually say I enjoy, but a neighbor and I work together every year to put 2 elk in the freezer. From the hunting to all the processing and packaging, we do that ourselves.
Meat-wise, can one elk last you a whole year, Ariel?
Pretty much. I don't quite eat solely that because I like some variety. So I do occasionally buy some poultry. Since unfortunately I don't seem to be able to raise my own, I've got way too many big predators. I'd have to pretty much build a concrete bunker if I wanted to keep a chicken alive here. So I occasionally buy some poultry, or again, fishing's not my thing, but I have friends who like to fish more than they like to eat the fish. So I've got some fish as well. So I'm not eating purely elk every day all year. But yes, usually by the time hunting season rolls around, we're, finishing up the last pack or 2 of meat out of the freezer. So
what is it like homesteading as a single woman by herself in the wilderness?
I think it's great. There's a lot of things I love doing, and I guess in some ways I think I probably have an easier time doing it because I'm not trying to relate to a spouse or deal with children or any of that at the same time. I can just do whatever I want. If I make a decision, I don't really have to consult anybody else's opinion. So that simplifies some things. But on the other hand, nobody can really do every single thing by themselves. And I do have good friends in the area. Like I said, a neighbor and I work together on the, hunting and meat processing. I go help other people with firewood and they help me with something. There's a lot of things I do myself, but I wouldn't want to give anybody the impression that I, have like dropped into a wilderness somewhere and have no human contact and forged my own steel from metal that I mined. Like, I do have interactions with other humans as well, so I'm not completely solo in that way.
What do you think? Is tiny home living for everybody? We're going to hear what Ariel has to say about that in a second. But first, it's time for the Homesteady Camel Train shout out. Today's Homesteady Camel Train shout out is to Cynthia Demarche. I think it's Demarche. Demarche. Cynthia joined the Homesteady Camel Train and she writes, "I'm a fan of your channel and family." She says she loves learning about homesteading and the animals. This is really cool. I think this is why YouTube, there's good and bad things about YouTube, but I think this next part that Cynthia mentions is one of the incredible things about YouTube, and one of the reasons I love being part of the YouTube sphere. Cynthia started watching YouTube to work her brain after she had a serious concussion. Her oldest son gave her the suggestion to start watching videos to get her brain doing some brain workouts. Cynthia, we totally understand the seriousness and really scary side of brain injuries and brain issues. We've talked about it on the channel before. Kay had brain surgery back when we first started dating. So our heart goes out to you, and I'm glad to know that YouTube and watching channels like ours is helping. She says she is so excited to learn about the camels and the milk. So Cynthia, we're gonna definitely keep exercising your brain as we share a bunch of information on camels, camel milk, and all sorts of other good things. So heads up for you, Cynthia, the Homesteady Camel Train t-shirt, one-of-a-kind t-shirt is coming your way. I don't remember what number we're on, but on the back of the t-shirt, your little camel will be highlighted in gold. The one little camel representing when you join the Camel Train. Guys, there are more than 70 tickets sold on the Camel Train, and if you remember at the beginning I said there's 100 tickets on the train, and that's it. So if you would like to get a lifetime membership to the Homesteady Pioneer Program. That means the episode that you're watching right now, it's a half version of our extended podcast. This podcast is actually 1 hour in length. You can see all the extended versions and you can join us for these interviews. At the end of this interview I do with Ariel, there's a bunch of Homesteading pioneers who are with us live who ask her questions, get their questions answered. You can be a part of that for your whole life. The one-time payment, click right there to join the Camel Train. In addition to that, you get the one-of-a-kind Camel Train t-shirt and a shout out on the show. We'll share your social media links, we'll share your YouTube channel, we'll share your story. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for being a part of the Camel Train. And today's video is brought to you by Cynthia. So in the comments below, thanks Cindy. She's in the comments section all the time, so no doubt you'll see her in the comments below. And now let's get back to Ariel's story. Let's hear whether or not she thinks tiny living is for everyone. Living this lifestyle, Ariel, what's your favorite thing about it?
I would say freedom. And that encompasses many, many aspects of life, because some people say, oh, you live such a simple life, that's awesome. And in a lot of ways I do, but some things are actually more complicated. My house isn't just warm because there's a thermostat set at 70 degrees and I don't have to think about it. My house is warm if I cut up a tree, split it up, carry it inside, and continually put it in my stove. Now, I really enjoy that. I actually really like splitting firewood. Some of those simple things do require some work, though it's nice I don't have any, utility bill or anything to pay. So that actually gives me a lot of financial freedom because my overall bills are so low. I own my house. I do work for the landowners in exchange for being able to park here, but I don't, that's not a monetary exchange. And with no utilities and such, of course, there's always going to be some stuff you need to have cash for, but my overall bills are very, very low. So that gives me a lot of freedom to do jobs I enjoy that are more flexible, more part-time, more seasonal, and all of that gives me a lot of freedom to go track down wildlife that walk by my house that day or something else, because most of those things are not on a set schedule that has to happen. I don't have to be somewhere at 7:30 a.m. to report to a boss, on Monday morning kind of thing. So it gives me financial freedom, which then gives me time freedom. And you, of course, still have to get things done because, sure, your firewood doesn't need split at 7:30 a.m., but if it's never split, then you're going to freeze when it's minus 25 degrees outside. I think some people look at what I'm doing now, and there's still things I do that are not my favorite thing in life. It's not like if you buy a tiny house, your whole life will be like roses and rainbows. That designing thing does take some time. If you want to do something totally different than what you're doing, it's probably not just going to happen tomorrow morning. People look at what I'm doing now, and I'm here now, but I've been here working at making it work this way for 6 years since moving into my tiny house. And there were things I did before that when I had never even thought about a tiny house that worked toward making this kind of thing possible, with the decisions about, not taking on debt for different things and so on. So that was a whole long process. And I just always want to be cautious that nobody looks at like, oh, you just got to sleep in, put wood in your stove, have a cup of tea and go walk in the woods. I want to do that. Depending where you are right now, that's not going to happen for you tomorrow morning necessarily. That's a process of making decisions and working towards things. And it was for me too. It didn't happen the next morning for me either.
Such a good point.
People look at, oh, you're doing something cool and fun now. They don't see the before I made videos, because I didn't have time to make videos, because making videos had never crossed my radar, that I was working for jobs and 100 hours a week and only sleeping 4 hours a night. And that is part of what is making this possible now. And I think the whole fun part of the internet and the social connections it can build can also sometimes be really discouraging if you're looking at where somebody else is and they've been working at something for many years and you're just starting today. It can feel like an impossible mountain to climb that you're never going to get there. Yeah. But they didn't get there in one day either.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Is this life right? Is it a right fit for everyone?
No, I don't think there's any such thing as any life that's a right fit for everyone. People are way too different. My goal is never to try to convince you to live just like me, but to show people what I'm doing and what works and what doesn't and so on, to hopefully if you are trying to do the exact same thing in one aspect of life, maybe you can learn from my mistakes. But I don't think everyone needs to or should live in a house this size. But I think I would encourage everyone to think about, how much house do you want? How much time do you want to spend cleaning and maintaining it? If you want a mansion and you've got the money and you want to spend your life taking care of a house, go for it. I think that's a little crazy. I'd rather go wander around the woods on snowshoes with my dog and only have to clean for a few minutes every month. I would just encourage people to stop and think out what is most important to them. What do you want in life? Don't just get a new job, climb a career ladder, buy a bigger house because you can and because that's what everybody does. Because I think I've found so much freedom in life by actually thinking out, what do I want to do, which is not the same as everybody, and working toward arranging things so that I can do more of what I care about in life. And that's probably not going to be the same thing as what you care about in life, but I would encourage everyone to do that kind of process. Stop and think about, what do you care about? What do you want to do? What do you want to be able to do? What do you want to have time for, energy for, money for, whatever? And then try to figure out, whether it's completely different than what I'm doing, what would you need to do to arrange your life to make more of what you care about possible? So that aspect, I think, would be applicable to everyone's life, but specifically living somewhere super cold and snowy in a tiny house with a wood stove, that is probably not everybody's thing, thankfully.
There's so many good takeaways, even if you're never going to live in a tiny home, or even if you're never going to live off grid. That lifestyle design, thinking about what you really want and making sure your life is, even if it takes time, what you really want. That was an awesome takeaway. And just seeing that, not letting things that might scare you, things that might scare us, like wild animals or being all by yourself in this tiny home, stop you from leading a life that's obviously one you really are passionate about and you really enjoy. So thank you so much for sharing this story with us. Ariel, if people have been hooked, if they want to see more, if they want to learn more, where do they go to follow your story? Where can they find you on the internet?
If they want updates every day, the most active on MeWe, the social media site that, if you haven't heard of it, it basically works just like Facebook, except there's no ads and there's no algorithm, so you actually get to see things in order, which makes it a lot of fun. So I usually post something about what we're doing almost every single day there. There are 550 something videos on my YouTube channel covering kind of all aspects of, you get to just see what I do here because that's what I do. So whether it has something to do with being in a tiny house or being off grid or gardening or the wildlife around us or shoveling snow or whatever, that's all covered there. And then my blog, fineth.blogspot.com, has posts fairly regularly on again, topics of kind of whatever I'm doing. And anywhere you look for me, Fineth is my house's name. It's Welsh for my nest. That's F-Y, a separate word, N-Y-T-H. So if you look for that anywhere, it will be me that comes up because I think I'm the only one using that name. So you can pretty much find me anywhere under that.
So definitely go and check out Ariel's YouTube channel. Me and my daughter were paging through and watching videos, and I really like the sprinkling of the wildlife videos in there. That was fantastic. There's some wildlife right there.
That's my tame life.
So
sleeping on my feet, making them hot.
We'll have links in the description below, and that way you can go and check out everything Ariel's doing and follow along in her story. The interview you just heard was actually only half of the entire interview. If you'd like to gain access to our extended full-length versions and, as we mentioned at the end there, join us live and ask questions with our guests, we do the Homesteady Live from the Barn show every single week with the Homesteady Pioneers on Monday nights, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join us for those and watch all of the extended, uncut versions in the Pioneer Library. Click the link in the description below to become a Homesteady Pioneer. You can become a Pioneer for as little as $5 a month, and you get access to all our members-only content.